Hey everyone, and welcome to another Photoshop tutorial from IceFlow Studios. And this is going to be somewhat of a tutorial, somewhat of a walkthrough. A few days ago I posted a time-lapse video where I created an iPhone completely in Photoshop. And that's what you see right in front of us here. Now the only outside sources that I used for this tutorial, or this design, was an image of the iPhone screen, which I scaled down just so I can get the dimensions and the accuracy of the iPhone as accurate as possible. Now if you want to watch this tutorial in higher quality, go to tutcast.com. There's a link in the YouTube sidebar and you can find this tutorial in higher quality. But anyways, I'm going to be demonstrating how I created this in this tutorial slash walkthrough. It will be a longer tutorial. It'll probably be closer to the 20-minute mark. So if you don't want to sit and watch the whole thing, then leave. So here we have our document that I created. As you can see, all the layers over here, and I'm going to very briefly go over what layers were created for this design. The first layer that I created was the body of the iPhone, which is basically a rounded rectangle tool with a stroke. Now when I say stroke, don't think of the medical kind of stroke that old people have. In Photoshop, a stroke is basically an outline that you can apply to a layer via a layer style, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But if we zoom in here, we have our black rounded rectangle, and we have an outline, a gray outline right there. That is our stroke. I'm not sure why they named it a stroke, but that's what it is. The next layer I created was the screen of the iPhone, which is very simply a rectangle with an inner shadow. Now that's basically to give it a little bit of depth because it's not flush with the body of the iPhone. Now if you have an iPhone, it's probably a lot easier. I've got one in my hand right now that I'm looking at, and it really helped creating a somewhat realistic, somewhat accurate iPhone design in Photoshop. So definitely either grab your iPhone or go to Google, grab a picture of an iPhone and use it as a reference. Now I'm not going to focus on the reflections right away. I'm going to focus on those after we finish the design because that's more for presentation purposes. So I'm going to very simply hide these reflections. The next layer that I created was the button, and it's very simply an ellipse with a gradient. And then of course we have our rounded rectangle right here for our symbol button, power button thing, symbol, home button, whatever it is. Next was the speaker at the top right over here, which is basically another rounded rectangle with a bevel and emboss going inwards. I'm going to show you how to do that. Then we have our siding and backing. Now this layer was pretty complicated because there's a lot of aspects to this layer. We have a white rounded rectangle with a pattern overlay, which was the opacity was decreased a little bit. I'm going to show you what pattern to add to give it this sort of a silver texture. And there was a stroke added, which includes the cellular, got it, and the Wi-Fi panel at the back of the iPhone, which is this black area here. I'm going to show you how to create an advanced stroke. This just sounds way too strange. So I'm going to show you how to create all of these aspects. And of course the buttons, which are pretty simple. They are modified rectangles. So anyway, enough talking. We're going to start creating this design. Hopefully I'm going to get through it as fast as possible, but as accurate and detailed as possible. So again, this will be a longer tutorial and walkthrough, so sit back and relax. So we're going to create a new document, file new, and I'm going to create it 400 by 500. Now obviously, depending on the size of your iPhone, will depend on what size document. Now again, I will mention, I don't know if I mentioned this, I don't even know what I'm talking about, but for the most part, all layers are vector. So I can grab this iPhone and stretch it and increase it, make it massive, and the quality will remain 100% crisp. So here we go. We're going to start by creating our rounded rectangle. So we're going to grab the rounded rectangle tool right over here, and for the radius, I'm going to make it nice and big. I'm going to create 35 just to give it a nice rounded edge. So we're going to drag out the body of the iPhone approximately this big. Now I'm not using any outside sources for this example, so we're going to be eyeing everything. So if it's not accurate, oh well. So here is our rounded rectangle. Now if what I'm going to do, I'm going to be sampling the colors from our other document, just so I get everything somewhat accurate. So there we go, and to add our stroke to this layer, we're going to go layer style, stroke. And as you can see, it adds a default red stroke. We're going to click on color, and we're going to add a very simple gray stroke like this. Click OK, and I'm going to decrease the size to 2, and click OK. So we have our body of the iPhone complete. Now what we're going to create is the screen of the iPhone. So we're going to grab a rectangle tool. We're going to make sure we have a create new layer shape button. Make sure you click that, just so it doesn't interfere with the vector shape below. We're going to make sure that style is set to none. And grab our color. I'm going to be sampling the colors again of the previous document. And very simply, we're going to drag out our rectangle. And I'm going to drag it right there. Now for some reason the color isn't showing. So I'm going to adjust the color manually, just like that. So we now have, I'm going to adjust this a little bit. Okay, so we now have our 2 layers. I don't know why this isn't working. There we go. So we now have our 2 layers. We have our body of the iPhone. And my phone fell on the floor. Yeah, that was my iPhone. Okay, anyway. Continuing with the tutorial. Now I have a very smashed iPhone. Okay. We have our body of the iPhone, which mine is now on the floor. But anyway, and our screen of the iPhone. I'm completely lost now that my iPhone is on the floor. Okay, we're going to continue. Next thing we're going to do is the button of the iPhone. Focus, Howard, focus. We're going to grab an ellipse tool right here. And we're going to, again, make it so that it's set to none. And we're going to draw out, holding down Shift, draw out our button. Just like this. Now, if you have this path showing, if you're on a Mac, hold down Command, actually, yeah, hold down Command, Shift, and press the letter H. H, H, H. If you're on a PC, it's Control, Shift, and H. That'll show or hide the path. So we don't want the path because it's somewhat distracting. So once we have our, it's very hard to see what's there. Once we have our button shape, we're going to go back again to layer style, gradient overlay. And we're going to add a gradient just to make it look like it's going inwards. So we're going to click on the gradient bar right here to bring up our gradient editor. Now the bottom is going to be a little bit light. So we're going to double click on the black. We're going to make it somewhere around here. And the top, which is the white right now, we're going to make it nice and dark. And I'm going to decrease this a little bit. So if we zoom in here, it looks somewhat like it's going inwards. Now obviously you can play with the colors to make it look like it's a lot more effective, like I did in this document right here. Now we're going to create the symbol, the home symbol for the button. So we're going to grab our rounded rectangle tool. I'm going to set my radius to 2. Again, click on these buttons here. Make sure the style is set to none. I'm going to make it white just so I can see it. Holding down Shift, drag out like so. And place it approximately there. Now we're going to go into layer style, blending options. And we're going to set the fill opacity to 0. And as you notice, our layer has disappeared. But if we add a stroke, we'll notice that we have a stroke visible. We're going to make it like that and make the radius the size 2. Now, what is the difference between fill opacity and opacity? Well, basically, fill opacity allows me to decrease the opacity of the actual layer, not affecting any of the layer styles. But if we decrease the opacity of the layer styles decreases as well. So we don't want that. We want our layer styles intact. So we're going to click OK. And it's probably a little bit too big, so we can very simply decrease it like that. Alright, there we go. We have our button, we have our body, we have our screen. We're moving along quite nicely, except for my iPhone, which is on the floor. Next, we're going to create the speaker.